Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning from Jefferson City, Missouri. Thank you guys for being here this morning as we have a conversation with Andrew Jones. I'm Andrea Sporsick, the director of the Missouri Film Office, and I was lucky enough to meet you when you first came here to shoot the first film, and then you brought another film
Do you
back.
remember what year that was?
I want to say it was 2011?
No,
2012, okay, 2012. I did know
Close.
2012. That was
Close.
Okay, cool.
But can you believe it's been 5 years?
I cannot, and was so excited that you brought another project back. But today we're going to start at the beginning because
Okay.
I want to know, we want to learn from your
I
experience.
feel like most of the people here have had private conversations, so this is going to be boring for almost everyone here. It's all
No,
right.
no. So have you always been interested in entertainment business?
That's all I was ever going to do. There was no other business. From the time I was a child, I was forcing my siblings to do shows, and that's all I've ever done. A friend of mine, we were trying to develop some things together, and we had an opportunity to do a children's show called Field Trip.
Awesome.
It was an interesting thing where they came to us and said, the show's going to be called Field Trip, go. And it's like, oh, okay. So we developed a show about these two little puppet characters that just kind of, so rather than doing a very dry educational show of today we're at the ice cream factory and let's do documentary style of how ice cream is made, we came up with these two puppet characters that were just flying through quantum space and would land in these places.
Cool.
And we would kind of write some interesting story about why they're in this place, or so there's always kind of this B story going along, but along the way we would then learn about these things. So it was fun. It was a lot of fun. There was no money in it. It was really low budget production, but we had a great time. If only I could do it now, because that was back in the late 90s, and I didn't, what I know about making a TV show, but
You learned a lot.
yeah, and it would have been a lot more fun now. But I also played one of the puppet characters. So
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
Cool. So how did you transition into editing then? Because you kind of went into that direction.
Well, so the industry was changing, and computers started to really take over, and a lot of the effects shops were starting to shut down. And Married with Children had its last season, and that was kind of that show alone sort of just paid the bills and kept the doors open in the shop. And people always go, wow, Married with Children, what? I don't remember anything there, but you'd be surprised if you really watch the show. And towards the end, towards like the last season, they would just start writing in weird props and things that were remote control and dummies of the characters that would fall out of windows and of the dogs, and it's just every episode. Like the last season, I think I worked on all but 2.
Wow.
There was that many things, and sitcoms are interesting because you get a call on Monday. We need this for taping this week, and you've only got a few days to put this stuff together, and it has to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably the most stressful thing about it. When you're working on sitcoms, there are no retakes. There's no,
Is it a live audience one
It's a
too?
live
Yeah.
audience. We would do 2 tapings on Fridays, and it's just got to work. There's no 2 ways about it. So those were the days I was really nervous when something was remote control, or something could go wrong. I had a few things go wrong that I still think about to this day, how many years later. I electrocuted Ed O'Neill once.
Well, not
Small
so
thing.
severely that
That's
he's no
okay.
longer
still,
with us.
Yeah, he's
so-
still doing okay.
Thank
but,
goodness.
and then I had a smoke machine once that I had someone working in my shop. I said, I had multiple jobs going on. It's like, please test this, make sure the shoot's tomorrow. It was something that Kelly Bundy had when she was she was this exterminator character for a while. That was the storyline that was going for a while. And the thing didn't work. And those are the horrible moments where then you got to think, okay, we just need to make this work now. And, so it always worked out. But, so anyway, so the industry was changing, and the shops were shutting down, and a lot of shops were shutting down. There just wasn't as much work anymore, and Married with Children was off the air, and we were in our 2nd season of Field Trip, and we were supposed to do a 3rd season, and they just kept saying, hold on, you're going to do it, just hold on. And we waited, and my shop was closed, and money was running out, and then they said, you know what, we're just going to run seasons 1 and 2 for the 3rd season. I think we've got enough episodes.
Wow.
Because we had done 26 total by that point. It's like, oh, okay, now what? So I had some skills editing. We had been editing some of our own things in our company. And I put the call out to my industry friends, do you guys know of anything going on? And I got a call from a friend of mine who was working at Playboy TV in doing on-air promotion. And he said, we got some openings here. And I knew nothing about it at that time, and I wasn't even an experienced Avid editor, but I lied. And I said, I know Avid, of course I do.
Fib,
And,
little
yeah,
fib.
No, I lied.
What were you editing on before that?
Discrete logic edit, some things that aren't even around anymore. They're all basically the same, but still, Avid was this really intimidating program that it's like, I remember being in a facility with some Avid editors that, hey, can you just let me sit down and can you just kind of show me how to use it? And he was like, oh, you don't just show someone how to use Avid. He's like, oh, okay, all right, I guess it's that complicated. And I actually dummied up a reel because I didn't even have any on-air promotion experience, and I kind of threw some stuff together and dummied it up, and I got the job. And within about a year, I was like on their top shows doing long-form shows, and then I kind of broke the ceiling cap. I was the first person to break that because the director specifically wanted me on a series that they were doing. But then that ran its course, and then I was plunged into the world of reality TV. And that finally led to, an Emmy nomination. And,
Yes. So, Nanny 911. You've done lots of reality stuff.
Yes.
Yes.
Hell's Kitchen and Nanny 911. That was everyone always goes, oh yeah, I remember that with the Super Nanny. It's like, no, that was the other show. Nanny 911 we did 3 seasons. It was the 3 nannies that went around. Did anyone ever see Nanny 911? Do you remember it? No. Okay. So, one person nodded just to be polite.
We're in the Midwest.
It was on Fox TV, and that's also. I mean, they were doing they were kind of pioneering a look in reality TV at that time. It was all over the top and crazy, and so yeah, we did that for 3 seasons. And I was kind of the lead editor on that. There was also a supervising editor, and really the 2 of us were kind of given the task of just by the 3rd season. Just make the show. Just figure out what the show is. Gotcha. So there was a lot of responsibility.
So at some point, you then AD'd, I see, first AD'd for Slaughterhouse?
Okay, that was, boy, talk about learning experiences.
Okay.
I had no clue what an AD was. Yeah. And Ryan, where's Ryan?
It's a tough job.
Yeah, there's Ryan. Ryan knows how hard that job is.
It's a tough job.
Ryan was the second AD of Darkness Reigns. Cool. I was 18, and they were shooting this horror movie in San Diego, and I knew I wanted to get into directing, and I thought, well, maybe being an assistant director would be a good way to do that. Little did I know that was about coming up with call sheets, and I didn't know how to be an assistant director. I had no training for that.
It's a lot of stuff, processes, and
it's a lot, and so I really ended up just kind of being an assistant to the director more than anything. It was a very low budget film, and I look back on that and it's like, what were you thinking? It's just, but sometimes you got to do those things. You got to just try it. Just jump in there and try. Whether it's dummying up a reel and trying to get a job.
I can see you're an innovative guy.
Yeah.
Yep.
In college, I did that too. It's like I got into the film department, and they were very methodical about what you were allowed to do, and I was a little bored, and it was like we're taking classes about, the megawatts that it takes to run satellite dishes, and it's like I want to make movies. I don't want to. Who cares about this stuff? So I started an on-campus film society, so that we were a non-profit organization. We could actually raise money. We could just go make our own movies, and so the professors hated me. They hated me because I wasn't sticking with the curriculum. They just detested me. So that didn't last long, and I actually didn't graduate. Just because I started working, and I thought, what am I doing? I'm taking time off of classes because I'm getting jobs working, and I'm in school. I mean, I'm doing what I'm in school to. It's like this doesn't make any sense. So I actually dropped out and never went back. And
there is that
it worked
debate
out okay.
Because our industry is very apprenticeship driven.
It is. Yeah. I honestly, I just don't think you can learn the film industry in classes. You can maybe learn how to use a camera. You can learn some of that stuff. There's nothing like being on a set.
True.
There's nothing like watching Steven Spielberg work. that was my training ground. And for me personally, that worked better than sitting in classes learning how many gigawatts or megawatts run a satellite dish.
So at the same time you wanting to be creative, what kinds of movies were influencing you? What kind of content were you watching?
I mean, it was a big Spielberg. That was when Spielberg was making great movies, and also I think for me personally, the '80s that was the great time of movies. Back to the Future, and just back when they made movies that were just entertaining, and they weren't all superhero movies, and I miss that. I wish we would go back to that, and a lot of that I try to bring to my movies, just kind of that throwback. Haunting of Cellblock 11 was a huge throwback to just kind of fun, quirky movies that are a little scary, a little funny. But yeah, Spielberg, of course, was a huge inspiration at that time.
Cool. Have you seen the documentary yet? I haven't seen it.
I've heard it. Someone just said the other day that it's great.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah.
So talk to us about your first create your film, Kings of the Evening. Talk to us about how that happened.
Okay, so I had been wanting to make the transition and direct feature films, and I was actually working with my dad, who's since passed away, but he was a longtime writer, and he was in the advertising business. Like Mad Men, that was his era. He was an ad guy in San Diego, and so my whole life I grew up with him saying, and he was also a novelist, so he would go to work and he'd come home and he'd sit at his typewriter and write novels. And he was a very well-published novelist. He published maybe 5 or 6 novels. A lot of them were kind of World War II dramas, and that was sort of his thing. But my whole life growing up, he said, learn to write. Learn to write. It will serve you well. No matter what you decide to do, it will serve you well. And so I kind of always took that with me throughout my life. And then I'm like 3rd generation writer in my family, or actually 4th generation. My great uncle, who was my dad's uncle, used to write shorts for Universal back in the 20s.
Wow,
and
cool.
So it's kind of in the blood. What was your question?
Kings of the Evening.
Oh, yeah. So he and I were working together, and we ended up writing this screenplay together. And I was working in the industry, and he kind of dreamed of working in the industry. And so finally we just decided, let's figure out how to make this movie. And it was a little bit, I mean, it's an African-American period drama. It takes place during the Depression. A lot of that is about his experiences growing up in Georgia during the Great Depression. A lot of these characters were people that he knew that would just kind of be transformed into a character in the screenplay. And so he and I figured out a way to make this movie, and it was 2006 when we kind of started it. We shot it in 2007. Still hadn't made the leap to digital at that time.
Okay.
So we shot on 35, and even theaters at that time were just starting to cross over. It was unusual to find the digital projectors, so now it's fantastic. It's just a much better time now. It's easier for independent filmmakers. But we made that movie, and it had a pretty phenomenal cast of a lot of people that maybe you don't know their name, but you go, oh yeah, that guy.
One very special cast member.
Which one?
The one that you might be married to right now.
Well, yes, I met my wife. I did meet my wife on this one. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, she came in to audition. She was the female lead, and we had seen 200 girls for this part, and we just could not find anybody. And it was just, everyone was falling short, and she was at a point in her career where she had kind of decided to give up because she had all these just near misses of getting some big things going. And so she kind of this one came across her agent's desk and was like, you really should go in and read for this. And she's like, I'm not going to get it, so why bother? And she had tickets for the opera up in Santa Barbara, and she was kind of breezing through. She's like, all right, I'll just go real quick on my way. And she came in and she read, and it was like, we were all just kind of like, whoa, there it is. That's her. And she left the room, and the casting director turned to me, and she's like, should we go grab her? I said, yeah, maybe, go, because she's on her way to Santa Barbara. It was my last day of casting.
Okay.
I was on my way to Austin to actually start prepping the film. And yeah, so she ended up getting the part, and then
She's crazy talented. I
She
see her
is.
everywhere on TV
Yeah.
now. I'm like, oh, there she is again.
Yeah, she's great. It's been kind of a rough year for her this year. Again, a lot of those just near misses.
It's business, man.
So she
Yeah.
tested for a pilot this year, and when you test for a show, it's an interesting process because your lawyers have to go in and negotiate your deal. It's when you're down to only like 2 or 3 people. And so they have to negotiate with all those people and set your deal so that if you get the part, you can't go, well, now I want $1 million. So they set your deal already, and then you test.
Right.
And so you're feeling good about yourself. You're feeling like this might be mine, and it might be. But it can only go to one person. And, you know, again, this one wasn't hers. But, yeah, crazy talented. And we have a good time writing. You know, I write parts for her now,
Awesome.
and she produces with me.
Cool.
Yeah.
So talk about the production of in Austin. You shot in Austin, the film.
Kings of the Evening, yeah, we shot in Austin. That was a little bit tough because we had a strike right in the middle of it, and you know it was under $1 million budget, and part of the process is you go into a town and you go to the unions, say we're coming to town, we're a non-union production, it's a right-to-work state, and they said, okay, we get it, your budget's low, we're not going to mess with you, thank you, it's good to know you're here. Halfway through production, picket line went up. Started with the Teamsters.
Wow.
And then it spread to IATSE. And even though we're non-union, a lot of our workers were union. They were told to stop. And so the union bosses all flew out from LA, and we had to sit across a table, and I was scared out of my mind. I'd never been through anything like that before, and they know it. This was all so well planned, so well orchestrated. I would have handled it differently today. I don't think I would have buckled. I probably would have just said, you know what, guys, it's a non-union production. If you want to put all these people out of work, that's fine. I'll go somewhere else and I'll shoot this movie.
Explain for those who maybe don't, the main difference between a union and non-union comes down to the pension and welfare.
That's yeah. I mean, they're all union members, so you can only work so many hours until there's overtime, and you pay into their pension and health, and it's all a wonderful thing. It's great, unless you're a low-budget movie. If you're a $100 million movie, that's fantastic. If you're under $1 million, those things are cost prohibitive. And everyone knew going onto it what this movie was, but they ended up flipping it. It's called flipping, so that they go into a non-union production and they flip it to a union production. And it was just a terrible, terrible experience.
And it's very expensive to do that.
Yeah. It was awful.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
It's the first time hearing. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Other than that, it was a great experience, and working in Austin was a lot of fun. And we shot in this little town north of Austin in Bartlett, Texas, which was kind of this town caught in time. So doing the 1930s period thing wasn't that hard, and there were local car clubs around, so they'd bring the cars in, and it was great.
Cool. So like big lessons learned from that would be the whole union thing.
The union.
Anything
So
else?
I'm very cautious about the union thing now, and other than that, yeah, just a lot of lessons about dealing with personalities. We had a lot of actors on that are very well known. So for me, it's a lot of navigating personalities and learning how to interact with certain actors, and they're all different, and you just kind of learn how to treat certain actors and how to get what you want, how to manipulate certain actors to get what you want, how to parent certain actors, and we had a lot of egos on that set, a lot. So I'm cautious of that now.
Gotcha. Changes the way you.
I prefer a very family-friendly set, and I think this is a great example how this is why I've come back to Jefferson City twice, because we're developing this family of actors and crew people, and it makes my life easier when it's like, okay, I know I can plug Peter into a part, and I don't even have to worry about it, and I know he's a good guy, and he's not going to go diva on me yet. And he's phenomenally talented, and so there's a great relief in that, where you can just plug in crew people and plug in actors, and makes our job easier.
Awesome. So talk about Haunting. How did you come here?
So Haunting of Cellblock 11, we after we finished Kings of the Evening, and it was released in 2010, and suddenly years go by, and I go away and I work on shows, Nanny 911 and all these other shows, and I wake up one day and it's like, wow, we shot that film so long ago. It's been 6 years, and I haven't made another movie. And it's like, what are we going to do? How are we going to make another movie? And I got together with my wife, and it's like, let's just do a low-budget horror movie, just for fun, for us. And we funded it. And so I wrote this movie about a prison, and then I started searching all over the country for a prison to shoot in. And there's a lot of them out there. And and I actually traveled around and looked at many prisons. And then I don't even remember how I came across Chris. And honestly,
I think you found it on Real Scout first, our database.
Probably.
I think you did, and then you connected
Maybe?
with Chris.
I honestly
you
don't
told
even
me you
remember.
did when I first met
Well,
you.
then,
so.
then that's
I'm
exactly what
holding you
happened.
to
That's
that.
exactly what happened. It probably is, because that's a great database.
Yes,
and
thank you.
it's fun for me to go on there and look at locations, and it's really exciting. I enjoy that part of the process. Okay, so then I found Missouri State Penitentiary, and then Chris and I started talking, and he was very persuasive and adamant that I just get out there and I look at it.
Awesome.
And
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. So I did. So I came out here, and I got to tell you, and this is the honest truth. I remember the day I was driving over the bridge for the first time, and I saw the Capitol, and I remember this clearly. And I'm not just saying this. This feeling that came over me of, oh, this is it. This is it. This feels. And I hadn't even seen the prison at this point. I just thought, this is it. I just feel it. And I guess I was right. 'Cause, I mean, Chris was just fantastic, and then I saw the prison, and we didn't even have permission yet. So I came to town. He was still trying to get permission from the state.
Right.
And so I was coming in a little bit blind, but I remember the first day we met at the prison, he said, we just heard from the state.
Cool.
They approved it. You've got permission. And then he gave me the tour, and it's like, I mean, it was perfect.
Awesome.
It was perfect. Yeah.
Great. So did you shot part in Los Angeles and part here?
We shot here first,
Okay.
and then we went back to LA and we shot like another week, some scenes there.
Excellent. And you-
Including like mocking up one room that was kind of doubling for a room at the prison. And, yeah.
Cool. And then what happened with the film? You got distribution, and we had a fun premiere that was
Yeah,
exciting. Some
yeah.
of you were probably here for that.
Yeah.
That was cool.
It did get distribution. People seemed to really like it. It was a quirky, fun little movie.
And you used your reality back, you kind of married the two a little bit.
Yeah, because the big what if on that movie was all these ghost shows that are out there. What if they ever were shooting in one of these locations and stuff actually did start going down? I mean, that was the what if. What would that be like if they were suddenly trapped in this place and their lives are at stake and for the first time truly things are happening? And so that was just kind of, I always just go on a what if to start writing a script. And that was the what if on that one.
Excellent.
So I brought in, so I thought, okay, it's a reality crew. I know that world inside and out. There's a lot of jabs to the film industry and the TV industry, and which seems to be kind of a common thread because Darkness Reigns has a lot of that too. It's a lot of
okay.
lot of my baggage. It's a little little therapy session on the screen. Yeah.
Awesome. So then Haunting got out into the world, and then you had this idea.
And then again, a few years started going by.
Yes.
It's like, wow, here we are again. I don't want another 6 years to go by, because Haunting came out in 2013. And I just thought, okay, it's time. Let's do it again. And but let's do it a little differently, and let's try to do it for even less money, because it's still, no matter how little you make your movie for, it's still very difficult to make your money back. There's so many people ahead of you with their handout that get paid first.
And middle people taking money all along the way.
Yeah, it's just it's so stacked against the filmmaker, and I've learned how to make much better deals with distributors. Kings of the Evening, boy, talk about learning experience. I learned what not to do in making a distribution deal. It took me years to see even a penny on that thing.
Really?
So yeah, it will never make its money back.
So is it the company or the deal?
Um,
Okay.
The deal, because it was not an unusual deal. It was the typical structure, and so on Haunting, I was lucky enough to go into distributors and say, no, if you're not paying me money, I'm not getting in the back of the line. So fortunately, and some of them said, well, sorry, that's the way we do it. And it's like, okay, good, goodbye, because I know I'm not going to make a deal where I make no money, where I can't even pay back ourselves
Investors.
for investing in the film. We were the investors on that one. So I just learned to make better deals. So then we just thought, let's do it again. So we tried to come up with something that I could do for even less money, which is hard to believe. And
It's tough.
it's tough. It just gets tougher and tougher. So I wrote something that we could shoot in even fewer days, and again, kind of a single location thing, and there we are.
Awesome. Prime Time Emmy nominated this
Yep.
year. That is fantastic.
Yeah, last year, actually, we didn't
Last
get
year.
it this year.
Okay.
But, and part of what happened was because we had two shows, because we have XL and we have the normal show, they were both submitted. And so it kind of cancels each other out,
Okay.
because it sort of siphons the votes off of one or the other.
Okay.
And so we just didn't get nominated this year. But it was really exciting last year. It was my first time going to the Emmys.
What is it like?
It's the Emmys itself is like super boring. It's really hard to get through that. And mine was the Creative Arts Emmys, which there's a lot of categories, and they used to do it in one night, which was like a 6. You had to sit there for like 6 hours
Wow.
and go through this, before you could go to the party, because really it's just about going to the party.
Yeah, of course.
That's all
Yes,
it's about.
Totally.
So now they break it into 2. They'll do it on a Saturday night and a Sunday night, so it's more manageable. But then the following weekend, we actually went to the big Emmys that was hosted by Jimmy Kimmel that year. It's hard to get through, honestly. That's my honest answer. It's very hard to sit through an award show. It was also the first year, for whatever reason, they decided not to have the bars in the lobby open during the show, so it's like, you gotta be kidding me. So we had to wait for the Governor's Ball. But then, you walk into the Governor's Ball. And it's jaw-dropping. They spend like $2.5 million on this party. And they take a convention center and they transform it into the Governor's Ball. And it is spectacular. It's just, there's nothing like it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Neat. That's awesome.
And we didn't win, and at the time going into it, it's like, I know we're not going to win, but then you see your name up there and they're reading it, and it's like, well, maybe I could. No, I didn't. And then you're disappointed, and then you see everyone walking around with their Emmys the rest of the night with a big smile on their face, and it's like, could have been me. I want one of those.
It's an honor to be nominated.
Yes. That's what they say.
That's what they say.
Yeah. It gets you there, and honestly, it's just such a spectacular experience to go through. It was really fun.
Very cool. Very cool. So you bounce back and forth between the editing and
Yeah.
Can I ask, do you have something coming up? Are you working on something new?
I'm always writing new stuff, and even when I tell myself, you know what, this is just too hard, I'm getting too old, I'm done, it's just, and then I have an idea for a script, and I go, I got to get this out of my head and just get it on paper. So I just finished another new one, which I sent to Peter. And again, this one I've written for all the actors we've worked with
Awesome.
on the last 2 movies, all the kind of the lead actors. And I'm just plugging people into roles. I'm just writing the roles for that person. And that was something unique and different, and it's the first time, and it was really fun to
Awesome.
do. And Peter, I wrote and said, Peter, here's my crazy idea. This guy is like, he's an old Hollywood agent, part Swifty Lazar, part Robert Evans. He's got a really bad spray tan, and he walks around in silk robes. And now with all that Harvey Weinstein stuff, it's like, oh, God. How far would you go with this, Peter? Because it's a comedy. And he's like, do
All
it.
the way.
Do it.
Speaking of Peter, let's bring Peter up. Peter Mayer, who's been in both films here, and he lives in St. Louis. Good friend. Good to see you here. So have you guys been collaborating on this then?
No, this one I just wrote, but we did write we wrote a Christmas script together that I'm really proud of and I love. And it was one that was in my mind, but I didn't quite have some of the tools to write it.
Okay.
Because some of it had to do with real estate and law, and started talking to Peter about it. And he was like the perfect collaborator because he had that background.
Yes.
And so he was able to bring that voice to it and that authenticity to it. And that was a lot of fun. And we wrote it really quickly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
About a month.
Yeah.
So, what's Andrew like as a director?
He's great.
What else is he going to say? Please, I'm sitting here. I'm
I
in the
know.
room.
I put you next to each
I'm
other.
going to tell you, truthfully, I've had a lot of bad things happen to me in my career. But one of the sensationally great ones was falling in with Andrew, which happened almost just by accident.
I was casting this role. It was we were doing Haunting of Cellblock 11, and there was still this one role I couldn't find locally, and I didn't know a lot of actors. Like, I know so many more actors now, it would be easier. And I remember waking up one day going, we start to shoot in a few days, and I don't have this person, and it was early in the morning, and I reached out to all the agencies in Kansas City and in St. Louis.
Okay.
And they started sending me tapes, and I got Peter's. And one of the things that impressed me the most was he wasn't reading off the page. It was all, and it was a hugely dialogue heavy, he was the storyteller giving us all this background. Pages and pages of dialogue. And I remember, maybe you had cue cards off to the side, and I just don't know, but I remember it being memorized, and it was really impressive, and there was something so uniquely interesting about him, about his face and about his voice, and it was like, that's it. And then after we worked together, we were done, and I remember saying to you, I want you in every movie I ever do. And you kind of looked at me like, yeah, okay, I've heard that before. But I've stuck with it so far, so.
Awesome.
You know, so you're talking about how there's a misconception that the business is in some way talent-driven. And I was in the graduate acting program at Catholic University in Washington, D.C. And at the time I was there, an Academy Award-winning actress named Mercedes McCambridge was the artist in residence. I don't know if many of you know her. She was.
Some people with gray hair here might know her, but.
She won an Academy Award in 1951 for making a film called All the King's Men. It was about the Governor Huey Long in Louisiana, Broderick Crawford. She won the Best Supporting Actress that year. Anyway, she was in Washington because she had been the uncredited voice of the devil in The Exorcist, which had been shot in Washington. And so anyway, she was the artist in residence. She was a very interesting woman. She had a wealth of experience. She was very, very gracious, very generous with her time. And before we did monologues or scenes for the class, she would invite you to do them for her personally so that she could work on them. So one day I was doing a monologue in her, we were in the dance studio, and I was having a very bad time of it, and I suddenly realized I could feel the energy just dropping out of me. So finally I said to her, and she was very intense, and finally I said to her, you know, I've come to the conclusion I really just don't have enough talent to do this. And without missing a beat, she looked at me and she said, that never stopped anybody.
That's right. God,
That's
so true.
Yeah.
So true.
Inspiration and perspiration.
Yeah.
Quote.
I mean, sometimes it's just the doggedness and also just luck, as Andrew said.
Yeah.
It's just, you happen to be in the right place at the right time.
Cool. So had you been to Jefferson City before? When you're based in St. Louis and you've been acting all over.
Well,
He's got a great
around.
resume.
Yeah, I lived in New York City for 12 years.
12 years.
There for a long time. Washington for 3 or 4 years. So no, I acted all over the country, mostly in regional theater, which is kind of a trap. You go to do a regional theater job, you make $600 a week, and then you come back to New York broke.
Yeah.
So.
And by the way, Darkness Reigns is really Peter's movie.
Oh.
I mean, he's arguably the star of it.
And you wrote that with him in mind as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, I wrote
Did
that
you know
for
that?
him.
No.
Okay.
I didn't, but I haven't seen it yet.
I know,
Just-
me
But
either.
no, I wrote that for him, and yeah, even people were trying to talk me out of it because they encourage you to put names in a lot of lead roles, and it's such a stupid trap, and because it really doesn't translate to anything. It kind of helps the foreign salespeople sell it, but it's really meaningless. And I said, no, I've got that role is cast.
Awesome. So you guys kept up after Haunting. You kept up with each other and worked
We
together
collaborated on Charlie's Christmas.
during that time period.
Mhm.
Okay.
It was about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And you write a little bit as well, Peter?
I do.
Great.
Yeah.
I'll do my plug for the Missouri Stories Scriptwriting Fellowship Program that we run right now, but both of these guys have submitted scripts. So you can look at our website, but you don't have to be a Missouri person. You just have to have a script, pilots or feature film scripts set in Missouri to apply. And I was able to work with you a little bit on your project, Peter, and I know another script that you didn't talk about yet that you have in your arsenal coming up that is also Missouri-based.
Mhm.
So talk to us about Darkness. We haven't really talked about
What would you like to know about it?
everything. So pre-production, you
It's-
shot when? In the
We
summertime?
shot last August.
August.
Yeah, in the Truman Hotel.
Yep.
Yeah, in August with no air
August is
conditioning.
rough in Missouri.
Yeah, it was, boy, and it was boarded up. So some of the rooms and some of the scenes, I mean, it was literally suffocating because there was no airflow in there. And Laura, I mean, your scene, my God, that was,
Dirty, smelly people.
it was, yeah.
Almost naked, dirty.
Almost naked, yeah. It was a rough shoot, and because I had this brilliant idea. Well, let's just do these really long takes because then we can just get through pages quickly. theoretically, it's a great idea. But now you've got to have actors that have theater backgrounds, which really help because we're doing the 7-page scenes without cutting.
Wow.
And boy, the dance that is with the camera and the actors, and they've all got to hit their mark. If anyone drops a line or anything, there is no coverage, so you have to stop and you have to start over. And so we might have done 18 takes of some of these, but it worked.
I was like, you're nearing.
What was our 36 was our record?
You're nearing Fincher there.
Do you remember what scene that was?
That was the very first day in the building next to Hoxton's.
Oh, the office scene?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Okay, David Fincher does like 82 takes.
That scene got close to that.
Yeah.
Because we did it twice, because we came back the next day and I had made some adjustments, so then, so it was very difficult. But that's why it took, I think, theater actors were the right choice, or actors with theater backgrounds were the right choice.
That I found that a lot too. I have a theater background. We talked about that. That there's a difference between when you have a theater background in the willingness to do more and just the long hours and all that. And this business is tough. People I don't think realize it. They think when it just kind of happens, it unfolds, but they don't realize the
that
hours.
It's glamorous or that it's fun. And it can be.
It can be.
But it's a lot of work. It's
so a typical day, I mean, we have 12 to 14-hour days usually.
Yeah, I tried to keep it down. I mean, the older I get, it's like I don't want to abuse everybody,
Sure.
and I
But
want to.
you, how long is your day?
It's long.
Yes.
But I look forward to that glass of scotch at the end of the day. It's like that drives me to have a shorter day. So.
That's your carrot, huh?
Yeah.
See, if you're an actor, you can just drink while it's all going
Oh.
on.
Yeah, that's right.
Time-honored tradition.
So Darkness, it's these very long takes. I bristle when people call it a found footage movie because it's not. But it's kind of a continuous footage, which is what I call it. It's kind of a new generation of found footage, but it's not found footage, and it's bookended with traditional narrative.
Okay.
But it was challenging. It was hot. It was in a closed hotel, and we had these long scenes, so it was very challenging.
So it was your second time in Jefferson City, and you've told me you have there's a special place in your heart for
There
Jefferson
is. I mean,
City.
I've spent so much time here now. It's like I'm practically a local. It's like it is kind of my home away from home, and it's just there's an ease here. There's just an ease, especially when you're doing low budget movies. Everything's hard. Everything is hard. So at least take some of that pressure off of yourself and work with people you've worked with, and so there's a known here. Crew and cast and Chris and.
What is your favorite part of the process? Just all of it. What's your favorite part?
Probably writing and then maybe shooting it. Although shooting, it's a nightmare at times, and it's so stressful. But probably still being on set and shooting is great.
And you bounce between theater and television and now films. What do you like the best?
The reality of being an actor is that, and I occasionally talk to young people about this, is that if you're going to do this for a living, you're going to have to act on camera. It's almost impossible to make your living acting on stage. Because my wife Carrie Ely is here, right there. She's one of the really great actresses in St. Louis, the Midwest. She does just finished doing the season at Stages St. Louis, which is a great. Basically summer stock. They put on Broadway caliber music. It's really good ones. They bring a lot of people in and match them with the best people in St. Louis. And Carrie's been there for many years, and she's developed friendships with a lot of people that work on Broadway. And you work on a production contract on Broadway, and you make $1,700 a week, which sounds like a lot of money, but you know what? It doesn't go very far in New York. And so the people that we know, generally speaking, are always looking to try to snag a role on a TV series, or movies, because that's the reality of it. If you're going to do this for a living, and doing it for a living is very different from doing it otherwise. It becomes it can be a nightmare of a life. But yeah, I mean that is the reality. You're going to have to work on camera.
And if you're going to work on camera, you more than likely have to work in Los Angeles or pretty much Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's a hard, and then when you're a Los Angeles actor, then it's really hard because they're all there.
Mhm.
So the competition is just so vast.
I don't know, I mean, acting on camera has its own, there's a different, somewhat different technique to it, although it seems to me that to be trained as a stage actor is the best way to start. It just seems that the actors that have had an extensive stage background are the ones that, as Andrew said, because frequently, if you're gonna say, look, people have also a misconception that movies are shot in bits and pieces, and often they're not, and often you're gonna be given like, several pages
Sure.
you're gonna have to do, which essentially, and then you're gonna have to remember your blocking, you're gonna have to do all kinds of things in addition to saying, don't trip over that cable,
Right.
Things like that. And it's just, if you've got an actor that has been trained on the stage, well, I think they probably pick it up a little faster.
What kind of transition was it for you when you went from stage to camera? What were there things that
It
were
was
harder?
harder the other way, actually, strangely enough, because there were no theaters in St. Louis where I grew up.
Okay.
There was the Muni,
Mhm.
that was it. But other than that, I became intrigued by the whole thing by watching old movies.
Oh, cool.
So acting to me was watching these guys like Jimmy Cagney and Spencer Tracy and people that I admired. So when I started acting, and again, you don't start in St. Louis, you don't start acting for the camera, you
No.
start acting on stage, and then when I went to Catholic University. So the directors were always saying, I can't speak up, I can't hear you. So I had to sort of do the process in reverse.
Okay.
Because to me, I'd watch these people on screen, and the one thing that occurred that I noticed when I was watching them is on camera you act with your eyes. And that's a difficult thing to do on stage because,
Can't see your eyes, yes.
It's an interesting, my wife, who's an actor, which we established, she always talks about working with Brad Pitt. And she was in Killing Them Softly, and she had she was the did anybody see Killing Them Softly? Okay.
Yeah.
Several.
She was the prostitute in the room with James Gandolfini and Brad Pitt, and
only woman in the film.
she's the only woman that appears in the whole movie, which is really interesting. The only woman in that movie. But she talks about Brad's technique a lot, and she said it was so interesting. You watch him, and it's like it's nothing. There's nothing coming out of his mouth. He's not moving. He's not. It's like how is this going to be good? And then you see it on camera, and it's perfection. It's brilliant. It jumps off the screen. So that technique of you're so small in film, and less is more.
Yeah. And there are a lot of stories about the particularly great British stage actors like Olivier and Richard Burton and people like that who have difficulty toning it down because that isn't how they, that wasn't what made them famous. They're famous for doing other things and being dynamic and compelling on stage and having. I saw Richard Burton's Hamlet, as a matter of fact. I was a kid when I'd gone up to New York on a trip with my dad and my mother. It was like a spring vacation, and somebody had gotten tickets to go to the theater. So my mother and I went with some people, and it was Burton's Hamlet. And that was one of the other things that interested. I mean, I'd never seen that kind of a performance on stage, and I still remember the effect produced by his voice when he delivered his first line. It was shocking. It was riveting. And you also learn that there's no substitute for that. I mean, that's just sort of a natural gift that some people have. They just have a presence, a quality.
Yeah.
I will say that in my experience as well, they have a energy that you feel like you're the only person in the room when people.
It's a charisma. And often when I'm casting, it's often about just that person that can bring charisma into the room because I know that will translate to the screen. It's not necessarily about the acting. It's often something that you can't even describe. It's that X factor. That's sort of what makes a movie star.
It becomes kind of an obsession, and that's the interesting thing I think about all facets of this business. There are days when you just absolutely detest it. You just couldn't. It's just like you don't know that you can go on. And then somebody says, "Well, we're going to have hey, do you want to do this role?" And then suddenly you're immersed in it.
Is that funny?
I mean, and it's almost like a drug, and I don't know that I can
Because
describe it.
Lenata goes through the same thing. She quits every other week.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you get something, and I don't know. You become obsessed with doing it as well as it can be done. And I think that's what does it. And once you sign on to a project, whether it's on stage or on camera, everything else goes out the window. And it doesn't matter if you're really not making much money, because you know that the people are going to see the production, they're going to see you on stage, they're going to see it on a screen. They're not going to wonder about, well, did the guy get paid or not? They just want to be entertained.
Right.
And you've got an obligation to do the very best you possibly can. And you want to do that because
That's what you're there for.
That's what you're there for.
That's your
I
job.
think there's a difference between the passion, when people bring a passion and when they don't bring a passion to it.
Yeah.
When it's just a job, and you know and you see the difference, you feel it on the screen.
Yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. And this is not a business to go through the motions in.
No.
You know, I mean, I don't know anybody. I know a lot of people whose parents wanted them to become dentists or wanted them to become plumbing contractors or wanted to become. But I've never known one guy in this business who said, "Well, my parents made me become an actor. My parents made me become a director."
Yeah. Lenata was in, my wife, she was in pre-med.
Oh, wow.
She was supposed to be a doctor. And that's what her parents sent her to, and her graduation day came, and she had to explain to her parents that she used the money for headshots instead of it was her MCAT money.
Oh, boy. So
and
she
then-
did get her degree. I mean, she did get it in the field?
No,
In
she graduated from the University of Chicago,
Okay.
but then finally transferred over to the fine arts. But she had to break it to her parents that I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm going to be an actor. And her dad was not happy about it. He's all about education in college, and that's his that's his professional field. But now he's so proud of her, and he's actually in Darkness Reigns as well.
Oh.
He has a cameo. Mhm.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
What about you, Peter? Was your family supportive of your choice to be an actor?
Oh, no. My father was the opposite of Andrew's situation. My father could name one actor, John Wayne.
Okay.
And when I once asked him, I said, just out of curiosity, do you know who Laurence Olivier is? And with a deadpan expression, he said, yeah, he's the president of Canada. I never knew.
Okay.
I never knew whether he was. I never found out whether he was kidding.
That's funny.
But no, my dad was not. My parents just about. Well, I was in law school when I had decided I was going to. I hated that, and I wanted to be an actor. I realized that was when the first wave of people had come in to start what is now the Rep, the St. Louis Repertory Theater, which at the time was called the Loretta Hilton. But these guys came in, and I had, through various circumstances, become really good friends with them. And the two guys that ran it came from Catholic University. That's where they had studied. And so I knew I wanted to go, and they had started to basically giving me private acting lessons, along with the first people, the company that came there. And again, they were very, very generous with their time. I knew I wanted to do that, and my parents basically told me that if I quit law school to go do this, they would have me come in.
Wow.
So,
That's pretty serious.
so I finished law school and then got my degree and immediately left for Washington, D.C. to join the acting program.
Join the circus?
Yeah. I ran away and joined the circus. But
What are some of your favorite roles? Can you share with us that you've portrayed over the years?
Early on, Catholic University had a touring regional repertory company called the National Repertory Players that I think still exists, that they ran in conjunction at that time with the Kennedy Center, and we went out and we did Shakespeare all over the country. So I got to do roles like Prince Hal, Henry IV Part 1, Mark Antony, Julius Caesar, Mercutio, and Romeo and Juliet. Those were, for a time I wanted to be a classical actor. Until I had an advisor at Catholic University who told me he said, look, this is a professional training program. We're turning people out to make a living doing this, and you'll starve as a Shakespearean actor here, so you can't do it. You gotta go, specializing in modern drama. I did King Lear in St. Louis a couple of years ago, so those were great things. But honestly, I've had more fun. I mean, the work that goes into things like that is it's backbreaking. And the thing about doing stage role performances is that they come and then they go, and then they're gone, and you have a memory, and some people remember them, some people don't. When you do a film, there's always a film. You feel like you've done something, and so the two movies that I've done with Andrew have been great. And this Darkness Reigns was fantastic. The 2 weeks that we were here, yes, the circumstances were hard, but everybody pulled together, and it was we felt like we were really doing something. The stuff on camera was great. I loved every second of it, and we just had a great time shooting here with Warren Yeager, who was the DP, and Nick, who's the makeup man, and everybody involved with it was just great.
Awesome.
So it was
And I ran you through it. Boy, I mean, it was a physical role for you. I mean, it was a lot of running. I mean, literally running around in an 80-degree closed down hotel, but I mean, up and down steps and over and over and over.
But I told you, I'm an old man, and this is the way I'd like to die.
Oh.
Yeah, I tried.
Really glad that did
Tried
not
to
happen.
fulfill it for you.
Really happy that did not happen.
Yeah, but it was tough. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun.
So you had a network TV show for a little bit, the Playboy
I was
Club,
in
which
the
you
Playboy.
worked at the Playboy. I just realized you guys have that little.
I have found in my career that almost everyone has that works professionally in the industry has somehow touched Playboy. The rumor is.
I'm gonna leave that one alone.
Well, I didn't say touched a Playboy. The rumor is Michael Bay used to work at Playboy.
Okay,
I mean, it's
interesting.
like everyone has worked there. I can't tell you how many people I run into who goes, "Oh yeah, I worked at Playboy TV."
But the show was
In the series.
on the series, and it had a tough ending.
Well, it also
but-
shows you how the business goes.
Yeah.
It was shot in Chicago, of course, and it was touted as one of the main series for NBC in the 2011.
Yep.
And it's interesting. This is another funny thing. Andrew and I have talked about this. It's amazing. It was done. It was Ron Howard's company. Ron Howard and Brian Grazer. What is their company called?
Imagine.
Yeah.
Imagine Entertainment.
Yeah. And it's done for NBC. So you think this has got huge people working on this.
Do you guys remember? It was a big show. It was advertising.
Benanti,
Amber
yeah.
Heard. Yep.
Yeah, it started with big Broadway star Laura Benanti was one of the stars on it. What was the other guy? The guy from Baywatch. I can't remember his name now. And Amber Heard.
Yep.
Who then went on to marry Johnny Depp.
And divorce.
And but they put this thing together, and it was and it was going to be a big, it was NBC's big series for that season. It's been done by Ron Howard and Brian Grazer, so you think it's something good. So I was cast through my agent in Chicago, and it was like they were ecstatic. I mean, it was like, this is going to be, you're going to be introduced in the 3rd episode, you're going to come back in the 6th, and you're going to go through the rest of the season. This character is going to be like this corrupt politician who's going to be trying to shut down the Playboy Club. But you're also then going to be, it turns out that you're a corrupt politician, and it's going to be revealed you're having an affair with one of the bunnies who's going to be Amber Heard.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Hello.
I'm thinking, as soon as they tell me this, because by this time, this is like 2011, I'm thinking, oh my God, I can pay off all my kids' student loans. My creditors are going to be so happy.
Yeah.
This is great. So everybody's just delighted. I would go up there and shoot the 3rd episode, and then, and it was again, if you're talking about pressurizing, we shot for like 16 hours every day, and you'd see they were sort of behind, and I got this is the other thing, how you start sensing these things and how important the director is. She was shooting everything. And you could tell that the crew was getting really unhappy, getting very unhappy with her, that there was just too much coverage. They were starting to say things. But anyway, so then by the time that was shot, then the next week, the first episode, you hit the thing premiere. And Carrie and I were watching it, and we watched about 15 minutes of it. And I looked at her, and she looked at me, and she said, "This sucks."
Oh.
This is no good.
Wow.
How did this happen?
Wow.
Well, first of all, it's like you show you how many of these miscalculations occur. Because when you're gonna do, if you're gonna do the Playboy Club, what do you expect to see when you talk about the Playboy Club? You expect TNA and Jiggle, and you gotta do this on network television, you can't show it. So right away, the whole thing is cut, it's like, this should have been on HBO, it shouldn't have been on NBC. And it just wasn't good, it just was not good, in spite of the fact that it had really good.
And they were up against that Pan Am show, which was a similar
Yes.
time period.
Right,
and,
which
yeah,
also didn't.
It did not do well.
Well, again, it also, it was sort of like the fallout from Mad Men. Mad Men by that time had become a big hit. You know, it took place in the early 1960s, and so did this, and but it didn't work.
It's weird trying to figure out, I run this fellowship when we talk a lot with writers, and then I work a lot with producers, and then there's studio execs. So it's like 3 different categories of people. And it's like trying to figure out what audiences want and what kinds of shows they want. And it's hard. I mean, I don't think you can. I think that's you put it in this machine and out comes, well, Netflix now. I guess they do know from data. They seem to be able to tell what we want to see. But I do think it comes down, none of that, you can't make any of that happen. It just has to be good. And it has to come out of a passionate place.
Well, this was so bad that it didn't even survive the first season.
Yep.
It was canceled the next week.
Yeah.
And
All
I'm
right.
still terribly in debt.
There's a donation. Oh, no, just kidding. There's not. So you guys, you have some questions? Can we ask questions from the audience? Spotlight on you. What do you want to know?
I will ask.
Okay.
So, for the writing stuff, how does somebody here, Jefferson City, Missouri, get their scripts to somebody who would be interested in reading?
I still haven't figured out how to get scripts to somebody. I mean, it's like, that's the truth is, it's hard. I mean, that's kind of where luck comes in.
And relationships.
And relationships, yeah. Oh, definitely relationships. It's all about relationships. I wish I had an answer for you because, yeah, it's tough. It's about being persistent and not giving up. And I mean, Peter will tell you he's got a really good property that he's been shopping and trying to make those inroads into LA. And he's finally finding some ways to do it, but it's not easy.
Part of it's the craft too. Like, I'm sorry, we'll get to you. What does it look like for you to write? You talked to me about getting up at 5 in the morning and you write in the morning, and there's a discipline, and I think you have to get your work to a point where it's ready to even talk to people about it. So.
Right, and even when you think it's ready, other people may look at it and just discard it, very quickly. But
Yeah, that's and that's something you got to be prepared for. The project that Andrew mentioned, years ago I wrote a screenplay about St. Louis in the late 1950s. St. Louis was a very interesting play. It was called City of the Blues, and to some extent it's an exploration of why, of what class distinctions mean, particularly racial class distinctions mean, in a supposedly class-free society. And this is, and just right after I'd written it first as a screenplay and then turned it into wrote it as a pilot. And just after that, Ferguson happened. And so it had a topicality that now is starting to bring it to the attention of some people in Los Angeles. But after like 5 years, I finally just did succeed this summer in getting an agent for it. And as soon as I did, now this is something I've been working on with a very good, real professional writer named Scott Phillips, who wrote he's one of the main crime noir novelists in the country. He just happens to live in St. Louis. But he wrote several of his novels have been on the New York Times bestseller list, one of which, The Ice Harvest, was made into a movie a few years ago with John Cusack and Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah.
And anyway, so we've been crafting this, and we had rewritten the pilot it'd gone through about 20 different versions. That's how many times we had rewritten it. So when this agent got a hold of it, one of the first things she started doing was making changes. She said, I'm going to represent this, but you understand, before this can be sent out, before I'm gonna send it out, this has to be absolutely perfect in every way. Obviously, there can't be any typos, the formatting has to be absolutely just perfect, and then we're gonna have to work on some scenes that I've got questions about. And she started asking questions about scenes that we've been working on for 5 years. And when I started thinking about it, I realized she was right. So we actually then had to rewrite scenes, but it took, before it got to the point where she could send it out, we worked on it for maybe another 6 weeks, following just notes and suggestions of hers. And that was after the thing had been rewritten 20 times over 5 years. So yeah, I mean, you know, you write something and you want somebody to say, oh my God, this is what I've been waiting for all my life. It's not gonna happen.
No, and Peter just mentioned something, the typos in the formatting, paramount. I mean, it's odd how important that is, but it's like, they will literally put it down. I've been reading scripts before from people, and if I start seeing a bunch of typos, I fold it and I put it down and say, I'm not gonna finish this. There's a psychology to it, but yeah, I guess, because you know, they think, well, they didn't care enough to put the effort in, so the writing probably isn't very good. So
when you guys talk about format, I mean, is there a specific?
yes,
format?
there's proper TV formatting, there's proper film formatting, and there's little shades of gray in there, but there is a format for sure.
So on the mofilm.org website, under the Mo Stories category, you can see scripts. So we have, we started this fellowship program for this very reason, is to help writers learn the craft, because it's different taking a class than actually learning from professionals who are actually working in the business. So there are scripts. So like the Winter's Bone script is there, and there's a television pilot. And TV writing is a lot different than feature film writing. The scripts look different, are formatted different. So check out the Mo Stories program. I'm actively courting and supporting, and writers are my new favorite people because nothing starts without them. And I do think definitely in the film side, the writer gets lost. It's about the director in the film business. On the TV side, not the case. The TV writers are the producers, and they are the people calling the shots and making the decisions. So it's a different paradigm. I do think it might change a little bit with Netflix and Amazon becoming bigger, and what a TV show is versus what a series is or what a movie is. It's all changing right now. So in good ways, hopefully.
This gentleman.
Yes.
Well, there were a couple things, like, I guess it goes on with hers, how to get a agent.
Yeah, I wish I had a great, honestly, it's like, it's one of the hardest things. They don't want to be solicited. That's the weird thing about it. They will reject you. They want to find you. Now the question becomes, so how do I make that happen? Good luck. I mean, it's work. It's just,
here's a story about that. This is that, you know, you get to an age where you think, I can't hear anything more that's going to surprise you. Then you hear something surprising. This has to do with exactly what you're asking. I've got another friend named Joe Leonard. Joe is a young, he's very similar in many ways to Andrew. He is a very accomplished writer, director. He went through the NYU film program. He's out in Hollywood making his living as an editor. He edits. First he edited for Ryan Murphy. He was one of the editors on Glee, and now he's with Lee Daniels. But he made a film, and the way I met him is he made a film that I had a role in called How I Got Lost. And he had a special showing of it in Los Angeles, and this is maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I was out there. He had a lot of, there were a lot of young people there and young actors, and I met one of them. I got to talk to a young actor, and he seemed like a really good guy. He's a very interesting guy, and he was talking about he and his girlfriend. And I said, do you have an agent? He said, no, I don't yet. And I said, does your girlfriend? He said, yeah, she is an agent. And I said, who is it? And he said, she won't tell me. And I said,
wow.
Wait a minute, stop, wait a minute.
That's hilarious.
Wait a minute. Because he said they live together, and I said, you guys live together, right? And you're not living as like roommates. I mean, you live together, you sleep in the same bed, yeah. I said, you do that, but she won't tell you who her agent is? And he said, no.
Wow.
So that told me, I think that story tells you.
Yeah, boy, don't ever ask someone, oh, can you introduce me to your agent? It's not going to happen.
Okay. And then on the piggyback on that is like the pitch fests that you go to, and then now you can get some online, like just a private, like 10 or 15.
And a lot of those are businesses, but boy,
I understand
but
that.
I do think it's at least a way to open the door. Absolutely.
Okay.
Like the fellowship. I mean, how else are you gonna do it? It's definitely worth the time.
You know, because I don't necessarily want to go to a big one that costs like $700.
Right.
But I've been seeing some online, like you can buy $30 for 10 minutes or 5 minutes.
I
And
would
some
say-
of them are, I research them, I try to go back to the ones that are like been founded since like 2000.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like film festivals, that's a business as well. It's the exact same thing. You just gotta be careful and do your research and just make sure it's not just someone out there who's found a way to make money off of you, but who can actually do something. But yeah, I think the fellowship programs are great.
And every time that you can be in person with it, I think is
Yeah.
different than
Right.
online. I mean, if you have an actual relationship with somebody, they get to know you and your project, and they care about it enough to, where I would say, go to film festivals where you can meet, and it's not just, I mean, producers, writers really need producers too. I mean, get the agents out of the equation
Yeah.
altogether, and finding producers that they're the ones who go out and get the money and sell it and all of that. So you wanna meet producers, and producers you can meet a little easier, a lot easier than agents, so.
Yeah, and to answer your question further, I don't have an agent. I can't get an agent. They don't wanna talk to me.
Do you have an editing agent though? No agents at all?
I don't really need that, but,
Okay.
until you do something that's a huge splash and they all wanna come to you, they don't wanna hear from you. Yeah, I've had projects represented by agents over the years, and some of the big ones, William Morris and CAA. But, anytime I've gone out and thought, well, let me see if I can just find someone to help me, they just close the door. They don't care what I've done or
That's an
what I'm
interesting
doing.
business model.
Yeah, because I look at their roster and I think, here's a guy who's done a short. That's it. That's all he's done. But and you're somehow representing them.
But it was at
But I
Sunday.
can't get.
Okay.
No, it's like
No, it
someone you've
wasn't?
never heard of. It's like,
Oh.
so they probably just had a relationship.
Yeah.
But I can't get an agent, so it's tough.
And that's why the joke in Los Angeles is, your taxi driver has a script and your busboy is gonna
Yeah.
pitch you his
Right,
idea and
yeah.
everything, because you're always around these people that you're trying to talk to about the business.
Yeah.
You don't have that in Jefferson City.
There was one more. Well, with mine, I've been thinking about doing like a little pilot. I was talking to like
Mhm.
Josh to film like a day or two, just,
Like a sizzle reel?
yeah,
Kind of?
like a 2-minute or 3-minute pilot to try to help sell it. Do you think that
Sometimes it
would be-
works, sometimes it doesn't. You still have to get that in front of people. And if you can't do it 100% perfectly, it's not gonna help the project
Which
any.
you guys did do, didn't you
Well,
guys
yeah,
shoot it?
You guys spent, you guys.
We did, we shot a sizzle reel for City of
Is
the
that what
Birds.
they call it, sizzle reel?
Yeah.
Yeah, or a teaser, sizzle reel,
Right.
yeah. And it gets complicated, because we figured that with this, it's a period piece. So it was gonna cost some money. And it wound up costing about $30,000 to shoot the thing. And Joe Leonard came into town and directed it. And, after we'd done it, I mean, it took a lot then to edit, get it put together, it was expensive. And, the agent that I just got, I said to her, we do have a sizzle reel up on the internet. And she said, I don't like sizzle reels.
Yeah.
She
Okay,
said,
so it's
no,
not-
she said,
so it's-
it locks,
Yeah.
it locks producers in.
Yeah.
To a
Right.
certain,
And it's kind of like, because if it's too polished, like you guys did a $30,000 sizzle reel, then you watch it, you want to, whoever you're showing it to expects to see the show in that case, and
Mhm.
it's like, but you still can't quite get there.
Right, yeah.
So it works against you then.
And part of what a script does is put it in your imagination
Yeah.
and let you, but if you show them something, that sticks.
Yeah. Now, like a lot of reality shows, they do
Totally.
sizzle reels for all that, and they will even do just Skype interviews, and it doesn't
Right.
have to be polished because you're just trying to sell a personality or a concept. So that's a different world, and that's where it does work okay. And it's almost better to play it all down and dumb it down, and not try to pretend I've made the show. This is what the show looks like.
Right. Well, see, my issue is, I have a story about a car, but you gotta see the car. It's not just a car like everybody who reads the script, well, it's just a car. Well, it's not. It's more of it's a high-end.
Okay, then a little footage of it might help you
Right.
in that
pictures
case,
and
but
footage.
photos would do the same thing, yeah.
Any other questions? Yep, here.
All right, back to the writing thread. I've written a few 10-minute plays, you know, and started a novel, never finished it, but I've always been interested in maybe someday writing a screenplay. And I could go out there and Google the academic differences between stage writing and screenwriting, but you know, from you guys, I mean, what would I need to know to become a screenwriter?
They're very formatted. It's a very specific format, the act structure, and that's all online.
I mean, you know, I mean, is there like things you need to think about, like take or like cuts and scenes and are they different?
Yeah, you don't want to do a lot of that. There's a tendency when it's, you know, when writers sit down maybe to write their first screenplay, they want to put in every cut, and it's like let the directors. It's what I tell a lot of writers: let the director do the directing, let the actors do the acting. You're just creating a blueprint. Just give them that blueprint, but make sure it's a good read too. That's something else my father like pounded in me. Even the action, just make sure it's a well-turned phrase and it's an enjoyable read. Because you're still asking someone to spend their time reading this thing, so make sure it's an enjoyable read, even if it's just stage direction. That it's well written and nicely written, but don't put too much detail in terms of camera movement and, you know, camera zooms in, and let the director do all that stuff.
Is there a resource that either of you has been more helpful than something else that you might suggest to people that are learning?
There's so much online. There's a big, thick book called Story that, I mean, if you really want to get into it,
Robert McKee.
yeah. If you want to devour that, I've never been able to get through it because it's so heady, but it's probably the best book on screenwriting ever. But it's just a big, thick book about that thing. But yeah, it's called Story.
You know, that's interesting because this writer, Scott Phillips, who makes his living doing it, and it's another thing I found in the business, that there's no substitute for professionalism. You know, the people that listen to it are the people that actually do it. And he, other than that book, that he sort of has a grudging respect for, he goes into paroxysms of critical fury against all these other books that are written.
Sid Fields is the other
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Sid Fields has written a series of books on screenwriting. Yeah, some people love them, some people hate them, but it's good basics. It's definitely good basics. So yeah, Sid Fields or Story.
And read scripts.
You know,
Read scripts. That's the best way to do it.
But the other thing about it is that there's no way to know, because you almost get the feeling that the ground is shifting under your feet as far as what the market is. You know, I mean, I have this feeling that the whole industry is changing so much, and maybe even the tastes are changing, and it's being driven by a lot of young people who aren't accustomed to looking at the same kind of material that Andrew and I enjoy. In other words,
Right.
I like to write you can tell it, for me, you can tell when a scene is well written, because there's an arc to it, there are beats in the scene, there are these things that we look for. And that's what my standard of merit, of quality. But I don't know if that's true anymore. I mean, it worries me a little bit.
Well, it is all shifting, and it's shifting in a good way in some ways because of Netflix, and it's opened it up. They're not sponsor driven anymore. They're not corporate driven the way it used to be. They don't have to please commercial sponsors. So it's created this atmosphere of just great freedom to be just creative and try things, and boy, they're really winning right now. But yeah, it's everything is shifting, and we're all trying to figure out how to shift with it, for sure.
Yeah. One of the other criticisms that I have experienced run up against is, well, do this faster. Do it faster. And it's hard to explain, well, wait a minute, I've done this, I took my time specifically because I wanted this to develop and the characters to be seen. I can, do it fast. So you can cut it down, cut it from 6 pages to 1. It's that kind of thing.
It's a different kind of writing, because you're not writing, like a play is a play. It's going to be what it is. A screenplay is a blueprint for somebody else to make something. So it's being very succinct about how you say things. It's a different kind of thinking
Yeah.
process.
Another thing you run into is if they'll get your script, and if they just page through it, and they see a bunch of long monologues, a bunch of long paragraphs, they'll throw it away.
Yeah, it's literally about the ratio of white space to black space. I mean, they sometimes readers, they'll flip through it and they look for that ratio, just to know that there's kind of an even balance. It's not too heavy in dialogue, and it's a strange thing, but that's just a visual indication of.
But also, once it's in format, it's supposed to be about a minute per page, if it's formatted correctly. So that also helps in the budgeting process and all of these things.
Yeah, well, which is something that burned me on Darkness Reigns, because of the technique of these long takes. I always go with the minute per page. I finished cutting the film, and it was like 60 minutes. And it was like, ooh, we were terribly short, but I think it's because there wasn't tons of stage direction.
Okay.
And I should have checked myself after the first couple days just to make sure that ratio was still correct.
Mhm.
So that's why I had to come back and actually shoot 2 new scenes, because the movie was too short.
Interesting.
Because normally you do go by that, but our technique threw that one off the rails.
And we came back, and it was November.
Oh, different.
Yeah.
It was-
Looks a little different.
So suddenly, it had gone from being, the Truman Hotel had gone
Yeah.
from being 110 degrees to
Right.
being like 40 degrees.
And they had cut the power off at that point, so.
There was no plumbing.
And now there's a
And the plumbing
building
was
even
bad,
gone.
and so even that is like, oh my God, I have no power, what am I gonna do? So I wrote one scene that was almost all night vision, and it worked.
We shot it in the.
Yeah,
in the
and it
basement.
worked great, and it was just to eat up screen time.
Awesome. Back there, you had a question?
Yeah, you talked about your visual effects background, and you kind of had to pivot as technology changed and kind of became more of an editor. With all this talk about like VR, virtual reality, and scripted VR formats, have you had any experience? What's the pulse like in Los Angeles?
I don't know, but I'm starting to read more about that, and it's getting scary, because I mean, when you watch, Rogue One, and you see Carrie Fisher there, and it's like, wow, I mean, you really start to think they're gonna replace actors, and it's all gonna be done with computers. And I mean, I've even heard talk of like these algorithms that, will almost start writing their own screenplays, and it's like, it's crazy where we're going with this stuff. We're not there yet. There's still room for, the human interaction, but it is continuing to shift. I don't know a lot about that shift, but it is continuing to shift in scary ways.
When I took my kids to see the first Shrek, my reaction was, well, that's the end of actors.
Wow.
We're done. Because you can see that in 20, 30, when was Shrek? Was that like
It was a long time ago, but yeah, because the computer animation just
Yeah.
has
So good.
continued to get better and better and better.
And now it's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they always do what you want them to.
Yeah, there's no divas, no attitudes. Yeah. Anyone else?
Any other questions? Yep.
Well, I mean, for any young filmmakers or any young professionals that are trying to, I guess, get within the entertainment industry, since how there's such a huge shift going on right now, and especially more so focus on the digital age, where you really don't even need film distribution deals. You can just shoot, edit, put it out there. Some people are able to attract, distribution through that. Even certain young actors and actresses, before they're even cast, some questions that are being proposed to them are, well, what's your social media following like?
Oh, yeah.
How, do you have any tips or advice for basically anybody with the shift that's going on right now? How are you able to kind of navigate through, through that industry?
Yeah, it's true that the whole social media thing, I mean, again, my wife is an actor. Sometimes it comes down to that for her, and because she doesn't spend a lot of time developing her following, but that is part of the casting process now, is seeing how many Instagram followers you have. And like everything technology, there's pros and cons. So yes, it's opened the door for people to do their own web series, and you might actually get noticed. There are people that just have done these web series that HBO or whoever took notice of, and suddenly they took off. But with that, there comes a glut of material, and that's what we just keep fighting. It's like, the new technology, but then there's a glut, and I've been through that too, where distribution's a lot harder now, because everybody with their phone is a movie maker. You don't have to have any training anymore. There's fewer barriers to entry because the price point of everything has come down. So anyone can go make a movie. So now when you go to distribute a movie, they've got 1,000 other ones they can choose from. So you better find something to make yourself stand out, and often it is the social media and starting to develop your own audience and your own following. So that stuff is important to do. And it's kind of a marriage now of technology and creativity. I was having a conversation with, I don't know if on the internet there's these little things called tasty videos, these little cooking things. I was having a conversation with a producer that was just working at that company, and they were tech guys who had this kind of love of travel and food, but they knew how to brand things, and they knew how to find an audience. That was the tech side of them. And so they thought, well, what can we do? And they came up with these tasty videos. They were doing them out of their garage. They now have built this multi-soundstage studio. It's a full machine that's working all the time. They have full-time staff of chefs and crew, and so that's a good example of how technology drove something and drove it to success. But you got to find that marriage of branding and technology, and marry it with something creative, and come up with something innovative. And look at them now.
You know, another thing would help that's in short supply among most of the artistic people is entrepreneurial ability.
It's true.
I don't know how to get it. You have these illuminating moments of. A couple of years ago, there was a well-known producer in Hollywood named Jerry Weintraub who died. Jerry Weintraub had an interesting career. He'd been up and down guy. He was a friend of James Caan, I guess, out of New Jersey. He'd come out to Hollywood in the late '50s. He'd started as a music manager. He managed John Denver. Then he started promoting. He promoted Frank Sinatra's concerts, a few of them. Then he got into TV and film, and he produced the Karate Kid stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then he went broke. Then he came back, and his last thing he did is he resurrected the Ocean's 11.
Mm-hmm.
So he died 2 years ago, and they had a documentary about it, and they had all the like Brad Pitt and George Clooney, who've been stars of the Ocean's 11 remakes. We're talking about him. You could tell they just loved the guy. That he was just great. And they talked about how much fun it was to be with him and how he could get things done. And then they interviewed Matt Damon, and Matt Damon told a really interesting story, to me the most interesting one. He said that about a year before Jerry Weintraub's death, Matt Damon's father had come into Hollywood to meet Matt, and Jerry Weintraub had taken them out to dinner. And during the course of the dinner, Matt Damon's father began lamenting the fact that Matt Damon had dropped out of college, that he had never gotten a degree. And Jerry Weintraub said, well, what difference does it make? He's a movie star. It doesn't make any difference. And Matt Damon's father apparently said, well, but it just means something to me. People from our generation, having a college degree or diploma means something. And Jerry Weintraub said to Matt Damon, he said, well, where'd you go? Where would you go? Where'd you drop out? And Matt Damon said, Harvard. And Jerry Weintraub said, look, I'll get you a degree. And Matt Damon said, he said, Jerry, that's really sweet of you, but it's Harvard. And Jerry Weintraub's response was, there's always a guy. And when I saw it, I thought, this is genius, because it shows two things. This is a guy who recognized how the world works. There's always a guy. He knew that. And the next step was, and I can get to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And my advice to you would be, if you don't have that kind of entrepreneurial ability, find somebody who does and hook up with them.
It's good advice.
And
Yeah.
create things. I mean, you learn everything that you did, even when you were not getting paid for it. You're creating things and doing things you're learning.
Create your own opportunities.
Keep doing,
yeah.
keep writing,
Yeah.
keep doing. Last question, one more question before we. Okay.
Yes. So I was kind of curious about, I'm really into podcasts, and the last few years, narrative podcasting has become a bigger and bigger thing. I went to the podcast festival in LA last week, and Casey Wayland, who's a big name in podcast world. He does a show called We're Alive, and they just did one called Bronzeville. They had Lawrence Fishburne starring in it, and I guess they're in talks to possibly make a TV show out of it now. And I thought I'd go ahead and say it because of what you just said. That's a great way to, if you're a writer, to make something with your writing. If you're an actor, to do something with your acting, and you can just put it out there. You can keep working and kind of build up.
And you never know. You
Or-
never know what's going to come of that.
And I just
We are-
recently heard about, do you know about this the narrative podcast thing? It's like they're old radio shows basically. So they're red parts, and it's
Yeah.
like a hot thing right now. I just
Right.
met with a screenwriter who's doing one, and I'm like, I've never heard of this.
I've just been asked to do one.
Okay.
And I don't know what they are. What are they?
Yeah.
They're,
Isn't it
Like
Reader's
Didn't Orson Welles or something.
Yeah,
like
it's
did
old
back
school
in the
radio
day,
plays.
right?
They're radio
Like,
plays.
Is that one where he's,
Worlds or-
yeah, like.
but they're, I mean,
scared
radio
everybody.
plays or serials that used to be on the radio. It's just a,
Like Jack Benny?
yeah.
Well,
But they're,
what I like to say is what I think, it hasn't hit yet because I haven't found a way to make money off of it
Right.
very consistently. But it's almost like what Netflix is to TV and movies. This is to radio and satellite radio. It's on demand. Any content you can imagine is out there for educational, entertainment.
But these are actual plays, short plays?
Yeah, well, and usually it's original content that people have written. But yeah, it would be like a radio play with sound effects, music, and performers, just in a half hour, maybe an hour format.
cool.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about it afterwards because we have
Shall
things
we,
to learn.
show the little 2-minute?
Oh, I didn't know we had a
little
clip.
teaser?
We have a clip?
We have a little 2-minute teaser.
We have a clip. I'm so excited. Yes. Can we do that?